Well, believe it or not, we are already entering off-season number 2 of the Scott Harris era. So I think it's important to look back at year 1 that is now in the books and talk about what went right, what went wrong, what worked, what didn't, and try and talk about what to expect in the future as well. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics and treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASC medical.com. Alrighty, well, welcome back. Hope everybody had a fantastic Monday. So we are going to, I guess in a way, we're kind of kicking off a series with this episode. For the next several weeks, while the playoffs are going on, non-playoff teams during the postseason, there's not a lot of news coming out of Tigers camp for the next few weeks. All right. Because in the offseason, you obviously have to wait until all the teams stop playing. So there's not going to be a ton of news until the World Series is over. But we are obviously not playing games. So we're kind of in a weird, dead spot in the quote unquote offseason. And so we're going to be talking about, we're going to do our player reviews. And we did that we've done it the last 2 off seasons actually, and kind of do deep dives, try to knock out a couple of players an episode and do deep dives on all of the dudes that are on the roster and, their future with the teams. Will they come back? Will they not? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think as a fan base, we are in a really interesting spot because we can do that with the man in charge as well, right? We can do that with our president of baseball operations. And I guess you can always do that, but it's a really unique position to be in, to have I guess not exactly, took over in August of 2022, but to have a 1 year kind of plateau to just take a breather, right? Collect our thoughts, really understand what this first year was, and really try to comprehend and understand what the future and the future direction of not only Scott Harris, but of this entire organization, obviously, is going to be. And I do think that starts with reviewing what has happened so far. And kind of I'm just going to kind of show up and throw up and just really just put out all of the thoughts that I have. It's not all bad and it's not all great. And I think that at the end, I'll I don't know if I'll do a letter grade or something to kind of, put it into a different perspective. Words are hard, but I think that it's just important to really realize how we got here so that we can talk about, before we have the conversations of what to expect this winter. Okay, so that starts with the beginning of the Scott Harris era, which was last winter and last offseason. That was our introduction to Scott Harris. And, I guess technically it started, was Matt Boyd our first signing? Does anyone remember? Chronologically, was he the first? Because if he was, that's objectively hilarious. You can have whatever opinion you want of Harris and Boyd and what happened. It's very unfortunate that he got injured. I hope he lands on his feet. I honestly, fantastic human being for starters, but I really hope that he's able to play Major League Baseball again, because that would be kind of a crappy way to go out for such a great guy. But that's just objectively funny. If he the first thing he did, we get an outside hire, he comes in and the first thing he does is just sign a guy who we've we've had for 6 years almost already. That is funny if that's what ended up happening. But regardless, the first thing he did was get rid of a lot of players. The roster turnover was grand. When you look at the 40-man roster at the end of 2022 versus the 40-man roster at like spring training or the beginning, opening day, whatever, of 2023, a lot of the bottom feeders of that 40-man roster, there was a ton of turnover there. And that was something that was needed and that I fully supported. And I like that he came in and did that. Now, the additions to fill those spots, some of them were just internal promotions, right? Lipsius, Brennan White, Parker Meadows, etc. A few more names, Warren Flores. But from the outside, the additions that he made, free agency was just Michael Lorenzen and Matthew Boyd, really, right? And I think that the what we were told was he was going to see what we have. And I was someone who was very vocal about that was what was going to happen, right? Last winter. And I was one of the people that was telling y'all the same thing. Like, don't expect him to do a ton. We need to see what we have. And that's what happened. And so there weren't a ton of moves last winter. We talked about those two. We'll talk about Lorenzen a little bit later. Boyd, again, unfortunate injury happened. Didn't really look too much different than the Matt Boyd we were used to when he was healthy. But he was a fine starter for us first couple of times through the lineup, much better than when the lineup turned over for the third time, or really, I guess, second time maybe by the end. But you get into the trades next. And the Gregory Soto and the Joe Jimenez trade. The Joe Jimenez trade is really easy and quick because I find it hard to believe that anyone is like super upset about the Joe Jimenez trade. It was 1 year of Joe for Justin Henry Malloy. And I think that there is still enough optimism surrounding Justin Henry Malloy to view that as a solid deal. Like, Joe Jimenez is a free agent again. He's a one-inning reliever. He was fine for Atlanta. He wasn't an all-star caliber pitcher or anything, but he was fine there. I think he pitched in some high leverage for them. Like, he did fine. He was solid. Justin Henry Malloy, we'll have that conversation a little bit more down the road because there's a lot of question marks surrounding him, just because he has really struggled everywhere they have tried to put him defensively. But at a bare minimum, that trade straight up, I don't think anyone is really upset about. Okay, so that one's fine. You have a potential asset going forward, not a guaranteed one, but a potential asset going forward. You have a top 10 prospect in your organization via that trade. Gregory Soto, that trade is the next one. And that one is so, it's just bleh to me. Like, genuinely, I that is how I would describe it. The technical term is bleh. Like, Gregory Soto did not have some uber fantastic year. He cut down the walk numbers, but he still had his implosions. And he had a rather, again, like a little fewer walks, but like a rather on brand enough Gregory Soto season. In return, they got 3 players. The Tigers got 3 players. There's a legitimate argument that only one is a major league caliber baseball player, and he is like a utility man or fourth outfielder at the major league level for a good baseball team. There's a very real argument for that, probably a winning one, right? Sands, I don't think, is going to be a part of this major league core going forward. He didn't play in a single major league game this past year. I don't expect that to really change next season. Maton, we documented his struggles, struggled mightily at the plate, struggled mightily in the field, didn't bring too much to the major league club besides drawing walks. We'll talk about him a little bit more in depth when we do his player review as well. And then like Vierling, same spiel. We'll talk about his like play style more in depth later. But just in terms of what you got for Soto, it's looking like utility player, and that's it. But that being said, is anyone really upset that Gregory Soto's not here? Is anyone like, you know what? I would do anything to still have Gregory Soto. I loved Greg more than anybody. I was his biggest fanboy, okay? I'm not sure if anybody is really upset that he's not here. Now, if you're upset that we didn't get more in the trade, then that's somewhat feasible. But I don't think that there was exactly a 15 to 20 suitors lining up around the block to all get their hands on Gregory Soto, and we're going to give you like top prospects to make it happen. So I I view it as bleh. Like it's just gross. It's not the players involved, obviously, but like it's just underwhelming. It's not a win. It's not a loss. It happened, and we have an asset. I think Veerling can be an asset for a good team, albeit not a starter. So we'll take it. I guess maybe that's it. We'll take it. Sure. Let's keep the ball rolling. We got a lot more to talk about with year one of the Scott Harris era. But first, I got to tell y'all about our friends over at Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace case. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in case of an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand, and it's simple. They handle everything from online evaluations to licensed pharmacy medication, delivery, and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. And you can also get $20 off of these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using my code locked on at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We'll be back tomorrow as we begin recapping and reviewing the 2023 season for some players. I don't know who tomorrow's going to be yet. I still got my to do my show prep for tomorrow's episode, but that's what the next couple of weeks is going to be. And obviously, if news happens, then we will talk about that when it happens. But you can expect that for the foreseeable future. Got some fun, interesting discussions to talk about. That is for darn sure. So let's keep talking about Harris, though. I think that's a really, really unique place, an interesting place to start. We talked about last winter. We talked about the trades that were made. And that leads us to, I guess, Zach McKinstry right before the season started. That was a fine addition. McKinstry should not be an everyday starter for a playoff team, a team that's has aspirations to win 88, 90, 92, 95 games. But I think that he can be a legitimate bench piece. I really do. He has his limitations offensively. He swings at every single breaking ball in the dirt. But he is, which frustrates that out of me, and I'm sure him as well. But he is a plus defender at like multiple positions. He is a plus defender, and I think that there's value in that. Decent base runner. I think that the organization likes him, to be honest. And I hit a really good May, and like obviously he's never gonna like do that again over the course of a full season. But if you can just get him to walk a little bit more like he did in May, I think there's a little bit more value to be untapped there even. But yeah, like you had that, and then you that's when we really get into the waivers. And I try to walk a line with the waiver wire discussion. I want to start by saying this. I greatly appreciate a front office that is actively and always trying to get better. The last front office, I never felt that way. I never at any point felt like they were actively trying to get better every single day. And I do genuinely appreciate the fact that the activity on the waiver wire implies that they are trying to get better every day. I also appreciate that some of these hit. Tyler Holton was one of the most valuable relievers in all of the American League. He was one of the most valuable players in the entire Tigers organization. He is a massive success story. Andy Ibanez was an above league average hitter by game 162. Played fine defense, ended up being like very surprisingly one of your better hitters. That's more of a testament to how bad the lineup still is, but like it's true. And that's a good find and a good add. So like I appreciate and understand that some of these worked out, not all of them, obviously. Like there's plenty of guys that we don't even remember their names anymore that were just like claimed on waivers and are somewhere in the organization or a free agent now. But most of them don't work out. They are waiver claims. The fact that we have multiple that we are singing the praises of is a good sign. I appreciate the eye for talent. I appreciate all of that. Okay. My point is more about the future than it is year one. If an active winter or an active next 12 months is just 50 waiver claims again, people are going to be rightfully pissed. Rightfully. Very, very justifiably upset. And I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. This is not a prediction. Okay. I'm just stating that I'm in a weird place, and I'm having this conversation now with the waivers portion of the show because I feel like that's where a lot of people allude this conversation and point this conversation towards. But we can't just only have waiver claims and that be the only way that we bring in outside talent. We need to have and they made 2 trades last offseason. They signed a couple of free agents, but like we need more. We need more creativity. We need more risks being taken. That was, the episode's still up. You can go look at the 2022 trade deadline episode when we didn't really do a whole lot, and I basically threw a temper tantrum on air just because that was my biggest gripe with Avila. I was so frustrated by the lack of risks and the lack of creativity that he displayed year after year after year, and that's why the organization never got any better. And I think that year one, for what it was, I'm fine with. Okay. I'm not throwing a parade. I'm not calling it the biggest success story that this organization has ever seen, but it's certainly far from a failure. And we'll get into more of those reasons as to why I don't think it's a failure throughout the rest of the show. But if year two looks exactly the same as year one, that is when I think I am going to get frustrated. Not saying that it's going to happen, just a precursor to if it does. This next 12 months cannot be identical to the first 12 months. That being said, I'm pleased with the first 12 months. Does that make any sense? Is that possible? Like, it's just this, I've never really felt this way. Like, it's a weird feeling to me. I'm okay with what's been done, but if you copy and paste it to year two, then I'm going to be upset. And I think that one of the reasons for that is, I'll ask you a question. In year one of Scott Harris's tenure, era, the regime, whatever, how many long-term pieces to this core has he acquired from the outside? And the draft does not count because every single team has draft picks. Okay. You can't trade your draft picks in baseball. Doesn't matter. Year in and year out, every single team is going to have draft picks. Okay. So all 30 teams technically added someone who could be a part of the long-term core. Outside of the MLB draft, which we'll talk about in a second, how many, numerical, think of a number, how many pieces are long-term pieces to this team that Harris acquired and weren't already here? I'm not saying it is zero. I'm just saying there's a real argument it's zero. I don't have a crystal ball. Again, I do not know what the answer is. I'm not saying it. I even think it is zero. I'm just saying it's very possible. And that is why I need more out of year two, but I'm not upset with year one. That makes sense? I hope it does. Again, I'll get to kind of like a letter grade type of like summary at the end before I send you on your Tuesdays. But that's kind of where I stand right now. Let's talk about the draft because that's obviously something that was rather controversial in year one in the Scott Harris era. as well. We'll do that right after I tell you all about our friends over at FanDuel. October baseball is back, and you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $5 to $200 in bonus bets. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on the action from the first pitch until the final out, but on everything from strikeouts, home runs, who will win the game, etc., etc. So head on over to fanduel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate with this postseason and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment here, Locked On Tigers. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Hopefully, I'm articulating my points decently. Let's get to the MLB draft. You know, this is a really short conversation for me. I understand. I follow baseball religiously. Okay, I understand how good Wyatt Langford has been. I understand that nobody in the draft class has really touched him so far in terms of production. He's been absolutely fantastic. We passed on him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is preposterous in my head to assume with full confidence that Max Clark will 100% not be as good as Wyatt Langford. Not saying it's not possible, not saying it's not even likely, but I am not going to write off that decision 3 months into the decision when neither are on the major league roster yet. Okay? Max Clark is what, 18, 19? We'll see what he does next year. We're going to take development in strides. I'm sorry I'm not like the hot takey, like I'm just going to like spew out something just to for like the sake of reaction. Like I am, that's not how my brain works with this kind of stuff. Like I'm not going to be the one to proclaim that that was some massive mistake. I still like Clark. I still like the profile that he brings, and I'm still very, very optimistic about him becoming a really impact player at the major league level. So that's all I have to say about the draft. You can disagree with me. I know plenty of people are just like adamantly, no, he screwed up Langford over him. Fine, we have differing opinions. We'll get into kind of all of the differing opinions here at the end, but like I am just not going to be the one to just be like, yep, 3 months into an 18-year-old's career, he's not as good as a guy who went to an SEC school in the minors, so he's going to suck and be worse than him for his entire career. I'm not the one. 2023 deadline, massive failure. I find it really hard to believe or any other angle out there that is anything but a failure for this trade deadline. This was Michael Lorenzen was a win in a vacuum. That signing was a win back to, dating back to last winter. You want to talk about that? Great. Win, win, win. Okay. He pitched well for you. He was your all-star. He pitched really well the last month. But leading up to the all-star game, you traded him. You got a prospect that some people are pretty excited about. It's a win. Okay. For especially 1-year deal. No one else even wanted to offer Michael Lorenzen a starting spot. Like we were one of the only organizations that would let him be a starting pitcher. A lot of others were kind of more keen on him being a reliever, similar to Matthew Boyd. So massive win. Okay. And then the trade deadline, the way you handled that, great. 2 thumbs up for Lorenzen. I was not a good student. I promise you, you can fail a test and still get some questions right. Okay. And that's how I view this deadline. I just, the way the Erod situation unfolded was just absolute. Calling it worst case scenario, and I'm not trying to be too dramatic here, but like calling it worst case scenario almost feels like it isn't doing it justice. Like if you would have asked me what worst case scenario for the trade deadline was, or for Erod specifically, even if you want to leave Lorenzen out of it, going into the deadline, I don't think I even could have concocted in my brain like what actually ended up happening. Like that's how bad I think it went. And obviously it's not 100% on Harris. Erod is the one that inflicted the inflicted probably isn't the right word, but exercised rather the no trade clause and whatnot. But it's Harris's job to have a plan B and to understand that it's a possibility. And I will always stand by that. Even if Erod gets a 4-year extension for the Tigers and he comes back and he's on this team for the next 4 years and he's a great pitcher, I'm going to celebrate him being in the rotation. There will always be a spot for a pitcher like Erod in my rotation. I've said that a million times. I'll say it again. I will rejoice if he is brought back and the contract isn't, like 38 million AAV. I will rejoice his return if he does. But that being said, it doesn't matter. I will never view this trade deadline and how that situation was handled as anything other than a failure. And that was a huge blow to, I think, his first year. I think that's like, I saw a couple of comments in a couple of episodes from a few days ago. I almost said couple days ago. That would have been 3 couples in a row. And one of them was one of the commenters had said, I'm pretty sure the Erod situation is really the only thing that is like a huge blow in year one. Like that is a very, very fair take in my opinion. It was a huge blow, and so that's really I'm trying to think if there's any other points I want to make on the deadline. That's really it. We don't need to beat that anymore. I think a lot of people are on the same page. Not everybody, but I feel like a lot of people, and at least I think I've made it pretty clear where I stand on the situation. And that leaves us to off the field, behind the scenes type of things that Harris has done. I think it's important to note the development side of things has gotten, it looked great this year. It was so encouraging and so promising at the minor league level. A lot of players taking steps in the right direction. The pitching development in this organization is turning into a legitimate asset and a legitimate weapon that this organization, I think, is going to use as a selling point to free agents and a selling point to prospects and a selling point to draftees. And that's exciting because I think in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever seen that, right? Certainly not while Dombrowski was here. Dombrowski won. I'm not trying to slight him, but no one was talking about how great the minor league development was in the Dombrowski era. They talked about how good the major league team was. And so there is a lot of optimism that comes with having good pitching development at the minor and major league level. And that's really important to me as well. The additions he's made to the coaching staff, I think, have been solid. There's still probably some work that can be done on the hitting side of things at the major league level, but even the hitting on the minor league level, you've seen some strides taken, right? You saw a lot of guys have really, really solid seasons. Certainly didn't come without some players taking steps back as well. But I think the development had a really, really good year. And whether that's a direct correlation or only a loose correlation, whatever, the fact of the matter is, in year one of the Scott Harris era, the development was good. It was really, really solid. And that's a point in the good column for Harris in year one. And I talked earlier about how from the outside, like not from the outside, but from players that he had brought in from the outside, there is an argument that, again, none of those players are part of the long-term piece. And like Justin Henry Malloy might be. I'm still really pumped about him. I'm not saying it's guaranteed no one. That's not what I'm trying to say before I have to reply to people and clarify that it's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying there's a real chance that it is. So far, in year one, that it's 0. And the development kind of not completely nullifies that, but helps push back against that, because you have guys like Reese Olson, who I don't think very many people expected to be talked about as a long-term piece. You have guys, Sawyer Gipson-Long, very small sample size, but I think there's some optimism there. On the pitching side of the ball, just in general, there's quite a few names that have taken huge strides. So that part is a big success. And you have like the nutritionist and like the new team plane and the new dorms in the minor league system and housing and whatnot. And you have the land that was purchased and what was it, the Dominican Republic, to help increase like our mark in the international market. Like there has been a lot that has gone right off camera and kind of behind the scenes and off the field, and that's good, and that's a step. It's it's frustrating because not from Harris's perspective or not directed towards Harris, but it's frustrating because Harris is not putting us above other teams. I think that's a big misconception with a lot of these reports that come out about the land being bought in the new, whatever, everything I just listed off. People are like, oh, like we're gonna like be huge players. Like, no, we're just now at equal playing field with all of them. We're not, we're not better than all these people. This is what good organizations and healthy organizations around baseball have been doing for years. So, like, we were just so ancient and archaic with where we were at in the previous regime that the new guy is now coming in and giving us equal playing field at least. So we don't, other organizations don't have a big head start against us. And that is good. That is a plus. So to summarize where I stand on this entire thing, I view this as a solid like B minus or a B first year. I think that there's a lot of optimism here. The major league team exceeded expectations. The system took steps forward. I feel like we are in a better place organizationally now than we were when Scott Harris took over. So that is why it is over a C, because I feel like we're better now than we were when he took over. Do I think that he accelerated the rebuild, X amount of years, and we're flying through this with flying colors, and we're significantly better? And now, in 1 year he turned us into a contender immediately? No, obviously, and that's why it's not significantly higher. But the biggest point I have is that looking ahead, this next calendar year is going to really shape some opinions to be a lot firmer. I said it earlier in the episode, and I'll say it again. I don't hate how year one went. And that's probably really dramatic wording. Let's try that again. I am fine with how year one went. I like a lot of what happened in year one. Okay? Top to bottom. We're not looking at anything in a vacuum, just overall. It's very hard to grasp everything that happened that we just laid out. And we still didn't get to like everything. We don't have time. That being said, as much as I am okay with how year one went, if year two looks exactly the same as year one, people are going to be rightfully upset. I am looking for in year two, and this is weirdly specific, I am looking for any addition from the outside that is brought in that this fan base and this organization and everybody that has an eye on the Tigers can look at and go, that player is part of the long-term puzzle of the Detroit Tigers. And there's some people I'm sure listening to this and are like, I think Justin Henry Malloy can be that. Fine. I don't disagree that he doesn't have the ability to. I don't at all. Not what I'm trying to say. But we don't have a guarantee yet. Harris has not brought in, 1 year in, a guaranteed that dude is a part of the future plans to this team. And it's only been a year. I still gave him a B or a B minus. That's why he doesn't have a D, because it is only a year. And I do expect him to do that eventually. But that is what I am looking for. And that is why I can't go significantly higher than that B minus or B. But I was a bad student. I would have done things to just get a B minus or a B in some stuff. All right. It's not a bad grade at all. Passing, solid, fine with year one. Didn't blow me away. Frustrated me some of the times. But I think we're in a better spot now than we were when he took over. And that's why I stand where I stand with it. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. I appreciate you all for tuning in and making us your first listen every day. We'll be back tomorrow. Like I said, not sure what players we're going to do, but that is what we will be doing for the next couple of weeks. I will say this as well. I want to hear as many opinions about this as possible. Okay, I've said it before. I think a lot of people are very like all in, all out, and I think that that's impossible after year one to be like to give him an F or an A plus. I think is equally as ridiculous. Um, so I'm very very interested and intrigued with the fan bases and this community's right this listenership's opinion of Harris because I think there's so many varying opinions. Some people think he completely botched the draft and there's no recovering. Some people think he completely botched the trade deadline, right? And like some people are really big on like some of the waiver claims he made. Some people not. Like there's so many different, and that's why I love this. That's why I love this, man. Like there's so an infinite amount of ways to build a good baseball team. Infinite. If there was only one model, everyone would just do that and everyone would be good sometimes. It's unlimited, and that's the beautiful, beautiful part about that job and this game is that there is no blueprint. And so I'm really fascinated with where all of y'all stand on his first year as well. And optimism, pessimism going forward, etc. I've said this a lot as well. I feel like we have lost the the reason that I fell in love with this industry. I promise I'll let you get on with your Tuesday here. But the reason that I fell in love with this industry is because I loved the debate of sports. It's my favorite thing, and the conversation, not even debate necessarily, just like the conversation of sports, I think is so beautiful. And I feel like in social media age and whatnot, like a lot of people have gotten to a point where it's just, oh well, if you disagree with me on my sports take, it's just like blank you, and uh, there's not even a conversation anymore. It's just people insulting each other, and like that's sad to me because that conversation is why I fell in love with this at a very young age. And so I please bring other opinions. Please, I beg of you. I'd love to read up and read about all of y'all's opinions on year one of Harris as well. All right. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.